On this week's Vaticano, we take another look at the debate on climate change and the church-led effort to combat it. The U.S. ambassador to the Holy See shares his expectations for the papal trip to the United States. The Pope meets the Israeli president. This doctor explains the shock that the undercover Planned Parenthood videos have caused even in Rome. Stay tuned. You're watching Vaticano.
Some Americans in Rome will be accompanying the Pope for portions of his United States trip. Ken Hackett is one of them, and he couldn't be happier about the Pope coming to America.
Having a visit of a Pope to the United States is a magnificent occasion in the first instance. Secondly, Pope Francis has such cachet, so to speak, on the world stage. People are looking to him, whether they be Catholics, non-Catholics, anybody, atheists. They see him as a true leader of values, and I think that's what he will leave behind as a legacy. He will cause people to raise questions in their own mind about their lifestyle, whether it be in relation to the environment, whether it be in relation to migrants, the poor, their concern about persecution of Christians. I think that's what he will leave behind, those deep thoughts. When he speaks to Congress, he really is addressing the American people and maybe the world, because it will be covered on every TV channel worldwide. When he speaks to the United Nations, which one would suspect he will talk about the environment, about his encyclical in the lead up to the Paris meeting on climate, that will be powerful as well. And then his statements, his engagement, his interaction with families who are struggling in Philadelphia, that will leave a binding impression on his views. Because as you know and your viewers know, as soon as he returns to Rome, he starts the second phase of the Synod on the Family. And so the topic is, in his mind, alive, active, and engaged. So this is a perfect lead-in from Philadelphia into the Synod.
It's the first ever World Meeting of Families in the United States. The ambassador, a Catholic himself, will participate in it not as a public official, but in a private capacity, on pilgrimage, with his family. We asked him if he sees a growing uncertainty as to the future of the traditional family in the U.S., since marriage has been redefined to include two persons of the same sex.
I think marriage is as strong as a man and a woman make it, as strong as the two people involved can bring love and sharing to their relationship. I don't think this is going to transform the whole question of marriage in the United States or in the world.
At the Vatican, Father Bill Donovan has been the link from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia in preparing for the World Meeting.
We want to try to bring as many resources and assistance to the human family so that they can understand and execute their role to a place of love. I think outside the sacramental economy, in terms of the graces that flow from the sacraments and the Church, one could say that in the natural order, maybe the greatest gift that God gives us is our life, you know, and this is a remarkable blessing that we have received from God, our person. And then perhaps we can say in the natural order that the family is the second most precious gift to us. And the reason is because once God gives us life, He also wants us to have a full life. He wants us to be loved, to be protected, to be saved, to be secured, to be valued. And perhaps it's the family, human family, that does this the best. This is the place where we feel most loved, most protected, most safe, most valued. And so perhaps in the natural economy of things, one could say that after the gift of life itself, perhaps the second great gift that God has given us is the family. And so the Church recognizes that in the natural order in the Church, as well as other men and women of other faiths, men and women of goodwill, can participate in the importance and the dignity of the family. And so we want to bring as many resources available to help families. At base, I think, you know, as Archbishop Chaput said, that this is a privileged moment for conversion. And I think perhaps this is a beautiful moment, in spite of all the wonderful intellectual presentations we give, and in addition to all the wonderful artistic and cultural celebrations that will take place, in addition to the spiritual moments, I think fundamentally it would be wonderful if each person can take away something that makes him or her a better person and improves their family. Opening their minds and hearts to Christ and something that will improve themselves and their families. And I think this is our joy, this is our hope, to bring greater happiness, greater peace, greater security, salvation to our families.
The World Meeting of Families Congress will take place from September 22nd to the 25th. A prayer vigil and Mass with Pope Francis will close the week on September 26th and 27th.
A couple of weeks ago, mayors from all over the world gathered in Rome to discuss practical solutions to confronting ecological crises in their respective contexts. They followed an invitation from the Pope himself. Yet many of them are not fully supportive of the Church's ethical teaching. Some mayors and even governors are openly supportive of abortion, for example. Is it in the interests of the Church to get these politicians on board for the Church's mission? A representative from the Acton Institute in Rome gives his point of view.
My main concern would be that it was very ideologically one-sided, that all the mayors and governors were left-wing mayors, many of whom were not particularly friendly to the Catholic Church on issues like marriage and family life. But I mean, that itself is okay. I don't have a problem with the Church dialoguing with politicians who are of different religions or even fallen away Catholics. But the issue was on something like climate change and something like environmental issues, where the left tends to have one set of policies that it favors, and the right has different policies. It looks like the Church is favoring one set of policies over another, when they should probably be left for people to decide on their own. Catholic voters in countries like the United States are notoriously split between Republicans and Democrats, and we reflect the rest of the country. So having the Church be seen as taking sides in a policy debate on which there's no fixed moral principle other than respect for the environment, I think might be a little bit short-sighted. But other than that, I think it's a good thing for the Vatican to engage these politicians, and who knows, some of these politicians might even start to change their mind about the Catholic Church and what it has to say about social issues.
In the media, Pope Francis is very well received, even by non-Catholics. It seems tempting to latch on to his popularity for one's own causes, says this economist.
Politicians being politicians, they'll hijack anything that's popular. When the Pope was riding high in opinion polls, everybody wants to be the Pope's friend. And to have a photo with the Pope is a good opportunity for a politician. And I don't blame politicians for being politicians. This is what they do. At the same time, I think the Church has to be more careful about being used, instrumentalized for political ends. And I think most popes and bishops are aware of that, and they try to stay out of the political eye for those kind of electoral campaign purposes, and they know how to stay out of those.
Nonetheless, Pope Francis addresses real problems when he talks about the destruction of creation, especially in exploitation of natural resources and of people in third world countries. According to Catholic social teaching, the key to fighting poverty is in subsidiarity.
I think the Pope may be heard in terms of being a big supporter of the poor, and he realizes that poor countries are not going to be able to afford all the technological advances that the West has when it comes to producing clean energy. And there is a certain learning curve, let's call it, a polluting curve when it comes to industrialization. Poor countries use coal for power and electricity because it's much cheaper and you can produce a lot more of it than you can with other forms of electricity. So what's important is that poor countries not be left out, but be included in the global economy, in our technological societies. And I think the poor countries would like to have, obviously, more advanced technology, but sometimes they have to develop them themselves. And it shouldn't be just a matter of poor countries begging for more foreign aid or technological transfers, but they should be able to develop it themselves and use their own resources, find their own policies, and not have new policies dictated to them by the UN or rich Western countries, which would be a form of neocolonialism, as Pope Francis calls it.
The discussions will continue in preparation for Pope Francis' talk at the UN during his trip to the United States.
Pope Francis once more laid emphasis on the family during the general audience on Wednesday.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas,
Dear brothers and sisters, today we reflect on the close relationship between the family and the Christian community. The Church is a spiritual family, home to those who believe in Jesus and live according to His teachings. And the family, a small domestic church, is a school of love for neighbor and God. The great events of the world history are only remembered in books. The history of the people's affections, however, is conserved in the heart of God and begins in the family. This is the history that counts. This is what Jesus, Son of God, experienced when He was born into a family and there, for 30 years, learned the human condition in the silence of a hard-working life in a small village. When He began His public life, He wanted to form around Him an assembly, a convocation of persons. This is the Church. He didn't want it to be a cult for the privileged, but a hospitable family, a home where all, without exclusion, were welcomed and loved. It's therefore indispensable that the Church and the family walk together as witnesses of the communion of love, whose ultimate source is God Himself.
cuya fuente última es Dios mismo.
On Sunday, during his speech before the Angelus, Pope Francis explained the gospel of Jesus, healing a deaf and mute man.
Vengono poi evidenziati due gesti di Gesù.
Then we're told about two movements Jesus made. He touches the ears and the tongue of the deaf man to re-establish the relationship with this man who is blocked in communication. He first seeks to re-establish contact. But the miracle is a gift that comes from on high, which Jesus implores from the Father. That's why He raises His eyes to the heavens and orders, "Be opened." And the ears of the deaf man are opened, the knot of his tongue is untied, and he begins to speak correctly. At the origin of our Christian life in baptism, precisely that gesture and that word of Jesus are present. Ephata, be opened, and the miracle has been worked. We have been healed of the deafness of egotism and the muteness of being closed in on ourselves and of sin, and we have been inserted into the great family of the Church.
E siamo stati inseriti nella grande famiglia della Chiesa.
After the Angelus, he made the appeal to take on refugees during the Holy Year of Mercy.
In prossimità del Giubileo della Misericordia,
Before the upcoming Jubilee of Mercy, I make an appeal to parishes, religious communities, monasteries, and shrines all over Europe that they give expression to an application of the Gospel and welcome a family of refugees, a concrete gesture in preparation for the Holy Year of Mercy.
in preparazione all'anno santo della misericordia.
On Monday, Pope Francis received the bishops of Portugal in audience. In remarks, the Holy Father encouraged the bishops to persevere in the commitment of a constant and methodical evangelization, convinced that a truly Christian formation of conscience is of extreme and indispensable importance to help social maturity and to assure the true and balanced well-being of Portugal. Pope Francis is expected to visit the country in 2017 for the centenary of the apparitions of Fatima. Pope Francis held an audience with Israeli President Reuven Rivlin on Thursday, where they exchanged gifts and discussed efforts to secure peace and to address the plight of Middle East Christians. Pope Francis gave the Israeli president a new bronze medal. On the medal was a depiction of a rock split in two parts, but joined by an olive tree. The medal bore the words, "Search for what unites, overcome what divides." The Holy See and Israel have disagreed over the status of Palestine in the recent past. Israel has objected to the Holy See's recognition of the state of Palestine in its negotiations with Palestinian leaders.
thought I was going to be just drawing blood, not procuring tissue from aborted fetuses.
On September the 1st, the 9th undercover video was released by the Center for Medical Progress, in which Planned Parenthood is caught selling the body parts of aborted babies. The videos are undercover footage of meetings and conversations that were held with the leading staff of Planned Parenthood and affiliated so-called medical groups that agree, discuss, and negotiate the terms and pricing for selling aborted baby parts on demand. This doctor works with the Pontifical Academy for Life in Rome. She's appalled by the content of the videos.
Certainly, as you say, and as many comment, those are shock videos. I think that the real cause of preoccupation in society is the banalization of the fact that abortion is, as every act of killing, an act against human life and a deep injustice that is committed against the human person. This praxis, which was introduced into society initially as an exception in very specific cases, is today completely trivialized and becomes a source for business operations. Yet another worrying fact is that the protagonists of this commerce, of this business, are doctors themselves, those who publicly have professed to follow their conscience and to operate in the defense, protection, and promotion of human health and the life of humans in society.
Dr. Comoretto draws a parallel to another historic event that bears similarities in its rejection of the dignity of human life.
Therefore, I have to confess I have not seen the newest video, but in general the videos bring to mind another historic event that was very grave and that shocked humanity and the Western world a couple decades back, where we also dealt with crimes committed by doctors, and that was during the Nazi regime. Well, the whole world was under shock when she realized that doctors who, by vocation, are called to help people through good, in reality could work against the good of the people using their conscience, their knowledge, their ability, and out of this shock grew the World Association of Doctors and the Codex of Vigilance that has to be practiced by doctors. There you have it. We realize since a few decades we are finding ourselves in the same situation as before.
Pope Francis has announced that all priests worldwide will be able to absolve the sin of abortion in confession during the entirety of the Year of Mercy. It doesn't diminish the gravity of the sin. The Pope is actually following in the footsteps of his predecessors in the fight for life and the fight for souls.
Pope Francis has always confirmed the traditional teaching of the Church that was richly elaborated by his predecessors. This is absolutely true. And what I can say personally is that during the audience that he gave to the Pontifical Academy for Life, he always invited us to follow through with our scientific task to promote and protect human life. Clearly, the pastoral actions of the Vicar of Christ are multiple, and he cannot dedicate himself with the same intensity at the same time to all of them, but the work and the defense of life has been the same for Benedict and Pope Francis.
Currently, the Center for Medical Progress is under fire from Planned Parenthood for releasing the undercover videos. The founder of the project will continue to release more secretly recorded videos in the coming months.
During this year's World Humanitarian Day, the United Nations in Geneva held this panel discussion about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how they will impact humanitarian work and response.
Therefore, the Secretary-General has scheduled the first ever World Humanitarian Summit next May in Istanbul. And let me once more quote from his remarks. The summit will focus world attention on how we can better meet the needs of millions of people affected by conflict, disaster and crisis. I expect heads of state and government and leaders from civil society, the private sector, crisis-affected communities and multilateral organizations to announce bold new ideas to help set the course of humanitarian action for years and decades to come.
Moderator of the panel, Espen Barth Eide, emphasized the unprecedented moment the world faces today.
A moment in which the world is characterized by a deep security crisis that is just getting worse, not only in individual countries and regions, but also where we see a lack of trust between key players that we haven't seen for decades, which produces humanitarian concerns and crises and disasters that we haven't seen for many, many years.
The question, how to build the right bridges between the people that actually like to help and who feel they have a responsibility and interest in contributing, but don't know exactly how, and, on the other hand, the agencies, funds and programs and actors in the public sector who at least would claim to say how the money could be spent, but they don't have the money.
When you look at corporations, the best possible partnerships are when they are acting in line with their competencies, and they are helping us exactly in the areas in which they have expertise and in which they can provide us with the knowledge and the capacity that will allow us to be much more effective in what we do. When a company is able to provide us with the kind of expertise they use in their own work, that is where I believe the partnership is more relevant, much more than asking them for money to support our activities.
What is related, I think, to this question is the impact on people again, and then a number of people on the move. And Antonio may know the numbers much better than I do, but everybody is quoting or just referring to the fact that since the Second World War, we did not have so many people on the move like we're experiencing it before.
There are a lot of companies today still who would say this is a public policy issue with which we don't want to get involved. And there are companies which embrace the notion of corporate social responsibility in all its aspects, and they are interested to engage with in the way Antonio alluded to.
And I think one of the difficulties we have today is that we call everything humanitarian action, and out of that action, a tragic and disastrous proportion of, I'm sure, 90% of all humanitarian resources do and must go to conflict-related crises, where we had large numbers of people affected for a very long time. And that funding and the capacity to deal with crises is definitely under pressure.
The UN is looking forward to the upcoming 70th session in September this year, where the General Assembly will consider the adoption of Sustainable Development Goals and appropriate implementation actions which will pave the way for international cooperation in the coming years.
Are you a student and you like to travel abroad? Are you Catholic? Do you seek like-minded people who strive to improve in their faith? Then maybe the Pilgrim Project is exactly what you have been looking for. This new initiative seeks to provide young adults with Christian pilgrimage opportunities abroad. It was born from a particular experience.
I was here a few days prior to this particular pilgrimage, and I was staying at a hostel here in Rome, and I had went out with two people, one from London and one from Australia, and we went through Rome, walked with great speed. We hit all the great sites that you're supposed to on any travel brochure, and at the end of the day, they said we checked the boxes. We've seen what we needed to see. Rome wasn't built in a day, but we saw it in one day. And then the comment came, it's just a bunch of churches and a pile of rocks. What does it mean to me anyway? And I think that's the question that pilgrimage is supposed to answer, is what does this all mean to us here today?
The beauty of a city like Rome is irresistible and can indeed change lives.
I met a priest who's now the spiritual director of the Pilgrim Project, Father Mark Thielen. And he basically gave me a summer pilgrimage. I mean, you name it, every place in Rome, I got to visit it. I kind of got the back door, behind the scenes look, and it seriously changed my life and motivated me in my faith. And through conversations with Father Mark over the following years, we realized there was a real need, especially in the United States. Pilgrimage is not a common thing. In other parts of the world, Latin America, European countries, Families will often travel together on pilgrimage, once, twice, multiple times a year. So we set out to create, a nonprofit organization, really a national network that would enable young people around the world to find these opportunities to go on pilgrimages with young people from other countries.
The Pilgrim Project fills the gap and gives the possibility for young people to go on pilgrimage internationally.
College or recent grads that are mature enough to kind of understand what they're looking at, but that also, are young enough where maybe we can get them out of a tough place in their life, pull them from, the complacencies of everyday life, and enable them to have a spiritually enriching experience and meet people from all over the world. The second big thing that really sets us apart is that we are an international network. Right now, if you're in the US and you want to go on a pilgrimage, you really have to have heard about it through your church or your Catholic order or your school. But if you're a young accountant out there and you say, I want to go on the Camino de Santiago, you can't really Google and say, okay, there's a group going next week. We kind of want to do that. We want to create a world map where people can say, I want to go to Rome, I want to go to the Holy Land, and I want to meet young people in their teens and 20s from Chile or Mexico or Argentina, all these countries that we have found students, and I want to live my faith out and learn from them.
The group even gives out scholarships to help those in need.
We're looking for young adults ages 18 to 28 that either need some assistance, financial assistance, to help go on pilgrimages, or that are emerging leaders in their faith communities. And so with that sort of background, we want to help identify those that are looking for that pilgrimage experience and help defray the cost.
Ultimately, a pilgrimage is not just a vacation, but an experience. Beauty and artwork conveys a great message, but needs to be deciphered. That's all part of the project. That way, young people can rediscover the beauty of art and its meaning.
We need to bring people to places and help them to understand that language, because they're losing the ability to speak and understand that language. So pilgrimage needs to be bringing them out of their everyday lives, bringing them out of their everyday hustle bustle, so that they can actually start to understand the language of beauty, the language of faith.